to the second podcast from Data Clean Room Alliance from Spain. We are here super pleased to have a very special guest today. That is Annamalai from San Francisco that is taking really his precious time to be with us today and explain everything about his knowledge about Data Clean Room so far and his experience. So Annamalai, thank you once again. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself and give you a briefing about why your experience is so critical for us.
Sure. Thanks, Monica. Hey, this is Annamalai. I lead a product management team for Data Clean Room at Walmart. And before this, I've been spending almost like 14 years of experience, predominantly focused on data and data platforms. So before Walmart, I was in Adobe, where I was working in the Adobe Experience platform and so on. And in terms of Data Clean Room, why it's become important is because of a lot of regulations have come in place. Also, the end user expectation of making sure their data is used in a proper manner by the companies that control those data. And the technology has also matured enough where it's in a implementable state, I would say. So that's why I think data clean room has become a pretty important topic in certain areas of the industry.
So let me start with the first question, straight into the content. So is from Walmart that you got into this space of the data clean rooms, or how did you get into here?
So when I was in Adobe, I was working in Experience Platform, and think of Experience Platform as like a customer data platform or CDP. There are a lot of players in the CDP space, and when I work with customers, what I realized is there are a lot of activations that happen from the CDP. Right, as a customer, you have your first-party data. You activate for email marketing campaigns, for social campaigns, for display campaigns, and so on. But the challenge all of the customers had was how do you get measurement data back and tie it back to what people are doing in your website or in your physical store, etc. That was always a challenge. And at least in the US, there is the walled gardens, right? The big social media players and the streaming players, they almost always never share the data, right? Both from a privacy standpoint and also from like a business strategy standpoint. So it becomes almost impossible for you to get more granular details of how your campaign is doing. You obviously get at the campaign level measurement. So that's where I noticed some of the big players, at least the top two players in the US, do something called Data Clean Room and build a product on top of that, right? I was exposed to it. I was able to collaborate with those product teams, and that's kind of where my interest in Data Clean Room started. And when Walmart was, recruiting for a role, that kind of made sense to join here.
Right, great. So measurement, and taking the first of the key words that you're you're bringing us. So measurement is a key topic, and I saw that measurement on wall gardens is what it got you to here. So I don't know if Oscar, do you have any additional questions from now based on this?
Yes. So Namalai, talking about data cleaning room, what is the most common misconception you want to correct right away? Because there is a lot of conversation around that, and I think some people are confusing with data sharing or other functionalities.
So yeah, data clean room is a pretty, I would say, vast variations of implementation. There is no one product like you can install like a data clean room and it's the same across the board. Depending on which partner you're working with, there are the top three cloud vendors. There are data cloud providers right now offering clean room. There are other marketing companies and agencies offering clean rooms, right? There are variations in each of these implementations. A misconception that I constantly see when I talk to different teams is that, hey, as long as we use a data clean room, we are like secure, right? So the misconception there is that's not the case. It depends on how you implement it, what kind of policies you're applying in your data clean room instance, what data goes in, what data comes out, right? A lot of these, I would say, configurations and parameters that you tune in your version of the data clean room is very, very critical, right? You have to ensure you're tuning it in the right sense and you're legally compliant and so on. Only then the clean room is actually acting the way it should, right? Because in different use cases, you can make it more secure or less secure as you want, right? So you have to be really careful that you don't just assume just because you're using data clean room, everything is like good.
That's super interesting. So the technology has been like a few years around. Um, but nowadays it has become more popular, or at least people are talking more about that. So, looking back over time, what concepts or technologies were clear precursors to today's data cleaning rooms?
I would say the way to think about it is twofold, right? Obviously, there were regulations that kind of took over. There were some scandals, and the regulations came like GDPR. There was California regulations and state-based regulations. Again, in Asia, there are regulations and so on. There were also bits and pieces of technology that were already there, right? Like hashing an email, right? It's a very rudimentary experience, but a lot of people do that, right, from a very long time, and continue to do that as well, right, for activations. There's tokenization, there's masking, there is anonymization, synthetic data creation, and so on, right? Those are all technologies, and then there's also legal contracts that you sign, right? You collaborate with somebody, you're legally compliant that you won't share the data, etc., or you won't use the data that is being shared for anything that was not in the legal contract in the first place, right? So legal contract itself becomes the protection of the data, right? The piece where I think data clean room makes it more interesting, I don't think all of these have gone away. They still continue to exist. Some of it overlaps with the way you implement data clean room as well. But a data clean room kind of brings all of those disparate pieces of technology into a package solution that kind of bootstraps players to kind of unlock their use cases, right? If you're like a big tech company, you have vast amount of teams that can go and put all of these building blocks together to accomplish a particular use case that you want. But if you're a startup, you're not going to hire like 10 different teams to do all of these technologies, right? You would rather go to one player who has a data clean room and say, hey, I just want to use your SaaS solution and so on, right? Or you go to one of these cloud players and directly install a clean room instance on your environment, right? So it kind of accelerates the use of privacy safe data collaboration. I wouldn't say it replaces it completely.
So I do remember when I was using in Spain Adobe Audience Manager, the former DMP from Adobe. They have a functionality for data sharing between among their customers. Would you consider that a precursor of a data cleaning room?
I don't know the specifics of that particular company, but I would say yes, data sharing in a way is a precursor, right? But it's not entirely true, right? There are
Mhm.
data clean room use cases where the actual data never moves, right? Like if you're like party A and party B and both of them want to collaborate, their individual or respective data is completely masked or anonymized. And in some cases, doesn't even move, right? Only when the query executes, the necessary compute and the necessary data to respond to that particular query is what the data that needs to be accessed, right? You don't have to move like billions of records just to answer a question, right? You just at runtime pick the records that make sense, right? So in a way, that's completely different than data sharing, right? Data sharing means you actually have access to the data, right? You could technically do anything you want. The system itself is not controlling you. It's more of the legal contract that's controlling you, right? Hey, I am selling you this data for X purpose, and you agree legally that you would only use it for that purpose and you won't share it outside, right? The system itself is not enforcing. In the data clean room, once you set those policies and contracts in the system will self enforce it for you, right? So it's not the legal contract or the trust that you have to have. The system itself is enforcing it at runtime.
Thank you very much, because you have clarified a lot between the difference between data sharing and a data cleaning room in a very clear way. Thank you.
Indeed. Annamalai, I've got, you said to me a very specific word that to me it means a lot, that is use case. That many people, get into the broad picture, but doesn't really get into the concrete of what a use case is. So, well, taking into account Spain and the European Union, that you mentioned GDPR and some other regulation that are very specific to us, which are, I don't know, the top 2 or 3 use cases that you think a team can ship or can deliver in 90 days with the minimal tech and people data requirements necessary?
So yeah, I think the use case is one piece and the timeline is another piece, right? I'll probably attack the timeline piece. 60 to 90 days is pretty aggressive for a data clean room project, right? And there are reasons for that, right? It's not like a tech project where you install a particular software or you have a SaaS application and you can straightforwardly use it, because now you have at least a minimum of 2 different companies collaborating. which means that both of those companies have to go through their infosec approvals, their security review, their data governance review, their privacy, legal, and sales with the vendor you're using, and so on. So even if you're not building any new solution, you're just going to one of these cloud providers who already have a clean room instance that you can use. You still have to go through a lot of these process, right? A easy way to kind of get a feel for clean room and not having to go through all of those processes and maybe accelerate some of those processes is to work with internal teams, right? Let's say there are two different teams within a large organization that needs to collaborate with data, but for some legal reason they are not allowed to like directly share the data. Then you could probably explore like a 60 to 90-day application because you're not dealing with an external party, right? In terms of use cases, I think from an industry standpoint, advertisement is a very big yeah, use case for data clean room. At least that's what I'm seeing in like in the public in the US at least, right? There is a lot of all these streaming players who are entering the market right now, and especially they're opening up ads as an option as opposed to just paid subscription. They are starting to also give exposure to clean rooms for measurement of ads, right? So that's a very interesting space here. In terms of use cases that can be done within a particular organization is more like fraud could be thought of as an example, right? That could be something that you could do within your company. You may not always within, but you can at least explore within where you have a fraud team, you have a web team or an app team, and you want to kind of see without discrimination or without exposing granular level details what insights you can gain, like what is the pattern of fraud, etc. Those kind of things can be done within an internal organization. So it kind of helps you get a feel for the uh, to the using of data clean room, and your teams will start building that memory as well, right, or the skill set, which you can expand to more larger use cases with a longer time frame.
Great. Definitely, what I get from this is this is not like a super quick win usage in terms of technology, right? I think it needs to be a little bit more long term, strategic point of view when a customer and a brand or a company wants to embrace this kind of technology. So, based on that, I do have a question. I don't know if you
Yes.
perhaps know more about it, but which is the typical or the most common challenge that really derails are kind of a data clean room initiative within a company? Is that typically legal? Is it more this short-term view that perhaps they want to get short-term KPIs or insight or something, and perhaps they get a little bit bored along the way? What does typically happen that is not correct?
So yeah, I would say a big to the earlier question as well, right? A big insight I would give is to kind of nail down the use case you are going after. And when I say use case, it's not just the optics of what the use case is, and more so on the business value for the organization you are in, right? If you have a high business value and you have figured out that only the best way to do that is via data collaboration using Cleanroom, then you have leverage to work on it over an extended period of time, and you will have the resources to go after and solve these complex problems that will have to be solved to get this into production, right? But if you take like a simple use case and then try to implement like a complex solution for that, you may not get the mileage, right? Or you may not get the support from your stakeholders internally or externally, right? So that's a big thing. As long as you have a big dollar value or a big strategic value for your organization, I think you should be good. In terms of once you get into the execution, right? I see a lot of, uh, I think the biggest misconception or challenge you would face is that you have to be a little bit more proactive in figuring out what happens 3 months down the line, right? Because it involves a huge set of stakeholders. And I'll give you one example with legal, right? If you do not talk to your legal team until you complete developing everything, and then you are like, hey, I'm ready to release the product and I'm going to go have a chat with my legal team to just get the sign off, most probably you're not going to get the sign off, right? They're going to go ask you to go back and say, hey, you may not put X data into the clean room, right? Or you have to tokenize it before you put it into the clean room, right? So now you are like going back and your project is derailed, your release date gets pushed, you have to go work around that, right? And then next you may go to data governance and they may have a different set of requirements, right? They may say, hey, you cannot include certain column in a data set, right? Or you cannot allow a join on a particular column, right? So having that foresight into playing the future of what are the things that needs to fall in play for success and being proactive in engaging as a product leader with all of these teams is critical for such a complex project that ties a lot of stakeholders.
Okay, so what I understand
Yes.
is definitely embracing legal at the early stages, right? Because I don't know, I guess the California law also is a little kind of application of GDPR, so it happens to you. But in Europe and in Spain, we typically say no consent, no party. So what it means that, at the end of the day, most of the data you want to collect or you want to do something and you want to process needs certain type of consent. So that's the first thing. So
Correct.
to your point, previously, data clean rooms are not the yoga card that you can do anything as long as you use the data clean room. It's definitely, you need to align with legal. So, and I'm pretty sure Oscar has a point of view because he's been working in a very high regulated environment and vertical. So I'm pretty sure he's got something to say about it.
Yes, yes, you are right, Monica. So going back with GDPR and CCPA in mind, how do cleaning rooms help organizations stay compliant in practice? I mean, uh, I work in banking sector, but I will assume that this question is still relevant in any sector because you are sharing or uploading data from your customers into a cloud with different purposes. So how do cleaning rooms help organizations stay compliant in practice?
So what clean room does is it gives you a lot of capabilities, right? For example, right, you may not actually have to upload, right? There are internal tables, external tables. So you don't technically have to upload all your data into a cloud to be able to use a clean room. You could have it in your uh, storage layer, and then the clean room, when the question executes, it can access it, right? So that's the configuration, right? You get to choose which configuration you want to apply in terms of data access. There are privacy features like differential privacy, k anonymity, aggregation threshold, etc. Right? So, for example, if you do not want any metric to come out that is less than 100 cohort or distinct user IDs or 1,000 distinct user IDs, you could set that. So anybody who is accessing through the clean room will always be filtered by that, right? And you will have a list of filtered rows. Um,
Mhm.
Differential privacy helps you prevent differencing attacks, right? If you try to like play 1 plus 100 and 101 and try to get the user ID that was the delta, etc., you could prevent that. And there is a lot more encryption that you can do of the data that is going in, right? Like as SHA-256 is one example, but there are other encryptions you can do. You can tokenize the data that goes in. So all of these features helps you. And again, in the infrastructure also, there is like secure compute layer, etc. Right? So there's a bunch of these things that are already solved for you. So that's the good piece of going with the data clean room, right? If you think back to the previous question or the few questions earlier, you had to have done it individually one by one yourself, and that was impossible for smaller or mid-sized companies. But now you can go to any of these cloud vendors, and they already have this solved for you. All you have to do is work with your legal team and whoever is helping you uh, apply the requirements of GDPR or CCPA, etc., and make sure that you're setting those properly in the configuration that you're setting up. Right. I would say that's more important than trying to figure out how to build something that complies with GDPR. Right. For example, you can go to any of these clouds. I'm pretty sure you say, hey, go to their account team and say, I want to use a data clean room from Cloud X or Cloud Y. Is your data clean room solution compliant with GDPR? I'm guessing the answer is going to be yes. But the detail, the devil is in the detail, right? Because yes, it is compliant if you do XYZ properly, right? And that's where teams that are running these projects have to make sure that they work with their legal teams and make sure they apply those XYZ properly and not make a mistake there, right? Because you could have a compliant SaaS solution and make an implementation mistake that kind of voids the compliance, right? So that's where I would say is more important. The I think that's a big advantage of clean room, right? You don't have to build it anymore, right? It's already there. The multiple flavors of it's already available.
Cool. Yes, for me, one of the challenge, as you said, is involving in the first step legal teams as a stakeholder. But for me, is try to explain in a very simple and, if it's possible, visual way how the identity resolution work inside the data cleaning room. Because if they don't understand that, they're gonna get confused with all the terms you're saying, like privacy enhanced technologies and everything. So could you please explain how identity resolution work a little bit?
Yeah, I'll give you two options, right? I'm pretty sure there are many ways you can do this, but traditionally, I would say the top two most important ways of identity resolution inside a clean room is one. You are a company that already has an identity graph. Say, for example, your company X, and you start building an identity graph, right? each customer that you interact with who was consented, you start building their profile, and they have like email, phone, etc. Right? Whatever, you may have an internal identity as well, right? Cookies, etc. And you want to collaborate with somebody else, you obviously don't know what identity their customers they have, but at least you would agree on a namespace, right? Like, hey, this column contains email, right? And this column contains phone number. Obviously, you're not going to put the raw email or the raw phone number. You'll probably use like a one-way hash, right? So that there is no way they can reverse engineer and get the actual data. And you will ask your collaborator to also do the same thing, right? Hey, make sure, let's say Annamalai at gmail.com or like something like that is there. It's hashed into some junk characters, right? And if the other party also has the same email address, if they use a one-way hash, it'll come back to the same junk characters, right? So within the clean room, when you run an overlap or a join, that column you will get a match, right? Even though you don't know what the actual email ID is within the clean room, right? And whichever email IDs don't match between the two collaborators, it's not going to match inside the clean room as well. And since it is already hashed one way, you're not going to be able to reverse engineer and find out what the true email ID was, right? So that actually, if you think about it, the data sharing is not actually happening, right? You only are collaborating on a space where both of them know the actual customer, the same customer, right? So that's a very basic way of like putting a mapping table in, and then you're just overlapping using a SQL join or something like that. There are also identity vendors that are there, right? Who kind of have their own version of the graph. Maybe they are using POS transactions or credit card transactions or other means of creating like the entire graph of like probably a huge coverage of the United States or huge coverage of Canada, whatever, Europe, whatever, right? And now you have three parties in the mix, right? You want to collaborate with A wants to collaborate with B, but then there is a third player who's the identity resolution provider, right? Say that is party C, right? What ends up happening is you work out a deal or contract, you sign the legal contract with that third party who's the identity provider. They are going to give you both, right, party A and party B, a collaboration ID, right? So that
Mhm.
collaboration ID is going to be for all the identity graphs that I have as party A. They are going to look at it and then find out within their graph what is the collaboration ID, and then they are also going to give the same collaboration ID to the other party. So in the clean room, basically you're not dealing with email or phone number or anything like that. You just have a collaboration ID from that identity provider, and as long as the collaboration ID matches, you know that that's the same person, right? An advantage of that is you get more coverage. Also, you don't have to be dealing with individual identities, right? So, for example, I know somebody through email ID, and you know somebody through phone number. We won't match in the initial approach, right? Because you only know the phone number, I only know the email ID. But in the second approach, if you go through a third party, that party will be able to link that, okay, this phone number belongs to the same person as the email ID. So the collaboration ID is going to be the same for both. Henceforth, it'll match. So you get a little bit more of the match rate and etc. Yeah.
That's very interesting. I mean, um, so you have talked that there are some, I don't know, companies that have financial information from customers and they provide IDs. I don't think that's very common in Spain. So as you see in Spain, professionally within the digital marketing field, we tend to look to United States as our benchmark. So it is true that the use of second party data and data sharing is quite spread among companies in US.
So I would not say it's widespread, right? I would say in large companies, it kind of started like before COVID. I saw some of the, like when I say started, it's like more of coming up with official products that can be used from the cloud and used to scale your collaboration with second party data collaborations, right? Before that, probably it was like very manual. But right now, there are like startups that were really doing good. For example, Samuha was acquired by Snowflake. Habu was acquired by LiveRamp. I think Infosum was acquired by WPP. I think that's in Europe. So a lot of these clean room startups actually got in a way got traction more than the larger players, and then henceforth these startups got acquired by the larger players, right? I think the industry is kind of evolving to that now. These acquisitions are completed, and all the big cloud and data cloud providers all have a data clean room offering right now. I would expect that adoption to grow even further, right? And people, large companies that have a huge set of their own data, they may actually want to build out their own solution because it adds a more trust and an appearance of trust for external parties. But if you're a startup, I would say using one of these SaaS solutions from the cloud is the best way to do it, to part, second party collaboration, etc. Right. Um, Still, the use case is also important, as I mentioned earlier, right? You have to have a really high value use case for you to take time and effort and resources from your organization to go after solving it, and to have that timeline as well, right? If you think like, hey, I want to test it in 3 months, it's probably going to be really hard. Uh, and if the problem or the business value is not high enough, you're not going to get more than 3 months, right? So that's where I would say is very important to make sure you're going after like really, really big business opportunity, then it makes sense to kind of work out these details.
That was super interesting, Annamalai, to be honest. One thing that I is the first time that I hear, to be honest, is the collaboration ID. It was the first time that I hear that in my life. So it was really interesting. And based on that, the typical thing that it happens many times, and I know that it's very kind of short-minded perhaps, but when you speak to customers about match rates, because you spoke about identity, collaboration ID or something like that. So is that typically the main issue that you see, or there is something else? What is typically the same issue during the implementation of the project, not only on the governance side or on the people side, but also on the metrics or the expectations? Is that typically the main issue, that people expect their data to match at a bigger ratio, or how do you experience this?
I would say so, right? From a business standpoint, the reason you're collaborating with somebody else is the hypothesis is that somebody, the second party, has something of value about your customers that you don't already have, right? It could be an insight or it could be an activation that you're doing, etc. Right? And a very high level way of measuring whether that is true or not is to run an overlap and see, hey, how much is the overlap between the both of us, right? If I have 1 million customers and you have 1 million customers and these are completely different million customers, there's no need for collaboration, right? You don't have anything. I mean, there is some needs. You may want to understand, like, hey, in future, I want to go after that market, so I want to understand how they're behaving, etc. But in general, it's very not attractive, right? Another piece here is a lot of these companies, right? If you take, for example, people selling like, I would say like handbag, right? I don't know how in certain stores maybe you track, like if it's a very upscale shopping experience, you offer them credit card, so that you give them some cash back or something, or you ask them to create a loyalty ID, etc. But there are certain products where you don't actually enter like loyalty ID, right? If you're going to a shop and buying cereals, every time you buy cereal or every time you buy milk or every time you buy like a cookie, you are not going to put in your phone number and say, hey, this is Monica who bought the cookie, right? So the company that sells those cookies, right, they have a very hard time because they don't have their own first party data to be able to collaborate with some of these walled gardens or some of these ads providers, right? And this is where the third identity resolution provider in the example that I gave comes in, because they may probably, I don't know the regulations around this, I'm just guessing, they may be able to use some of these credit card transactions to kind of link who's who, which the actual manufacturer of the cereals or manufacturer of the shampoo or milk might not already have, right? So having that collaboration ID or bringing in a third party to help increase that overlap also becomes critical for that reason, right? Because that's when you start to understand your own customers, especially in product areas where you can't have like loyalty IDs or tracking,
Yeah.
or
And
it's not bought
actually,
on the website.
you mentioned now the verticals, right? Or the sectors, in terms of, do you think there is data clean rooms are a better fit for specific sectors of verticals, or not, or really not a good fit for some others? Is there a point of view around that? Should it be more attached to banking or more regulated industries? Perhaps they've got more issues with data collaboration, or all the way around, should be more retailer?
I think the as long as you have the use case where you're collaborating with two different parties, and what I have seen is that use case exists across the board, right? Whether you're in banking, whether you're on fraud or cybersecurity, whether you're on sports, right? It could be anything. Obviously, it's taking off in the ad space a lot more because there are already these walled gardens where you're not going to get access to the data, right? And the only way you can get some meaningful access from that data is through a clean room. So in a way, the market dynamics have forced players to adopt it or lose it, right? Lose access to that data or insights from the data. So that's where I think we are starting to see the adoption more from a data clean room standpoint. Now I'm starting to see on like the streaming services, etc., also starting to do ads. Now they are also coming a lot more in. Uh, what this will lead to, my prediction is for the technology itself to become much more mature, meaning that when I initially said, hey, you have to make sure you work with all of these things, you have to understand all of these policies, make sure you set the right policies for the right thing so that you don't create like data leakage, etc. Those might become more usable over time. Like you may not need like a super technical person to come in and implement it for you. Like regular people who are doing other technical stuff might be able to just use this as well. As that product matures, some of the long tail of use cases that exist but today are not being solved using data clean room might start adopting it over time, right? Like for example, banking, fraud, even low value use cases might make sense as the technology becomes simple for implementation. Startups and teams that would have not thought about hiring too many people to implement it at that point might say, hey, I just need one more resource to implement this, so I'll just go and solve this use case right now, right? So I think that's how it will play out.
Very good
Super
to know.
interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. Annamalai, we are approaching the end of the interview. So, because you have the privilege to work directly in this field, you might be able to forecast what technological innovation will shape the next wave of data cleaning routes. What do you have in mind? What do you think is going to be the next step?
I touched upon it a little bit, right? So I'll reiterate that, right? As the technology becomes more mature, I see more of an effort to drive adoption of what is already there, make it simple for adoption, right? Make the user experience simple, make the technical implementation simple, make the data collaboration simple, make the legal agreement simple. All of these things are available today. It just takes like a month each to do. So you end up with a year of work you need to do to get anything meaningful out of it. But over time, if it's like to the initial question, what can it be? What can be done in 60 days or 90 days? I think that will be the more innovation that we would see in the next few years. Another piece where I think data clean rooms can become interesting is in the AI space, right? Or a similar technology like data clean room, right? If you have training or inference that you want to do, but you have like say healthcare data, right? And that healthcare data for legal or business reasons cannot be used to train an LLM or whatever, right? Maybe at the stage of the inference, there is something that can be done within the clean room or similar to clean room kind of thing where the data is not actually being used to train. Maybe it's just used for summarization or quickly inferring some information to give a meaningful response without exposing the data, right? Things
Hmm.
like that could happen. I wouldn't say it should be done to the clean room, right? That could potentially be new technologies that come up that solve it. But I think clean room can go in that direction as well, right? But what seems more certain to me is the solving the user experience challenge, right? Like how do you reduce the time for teams to adopt from like 1 year to 6 months to like, hey, uh, in 1 month I can get a use case done, right? Um, I think that innovation will actually drive more adoption for clean room than adding net new technology on top of what is already there.
Now, like you blow my mind. I mean, you are super savvy on this field, and I truly envy you. How do you do to keep up to date? What podcasts, online media, courses? What information are you following to be updated on this field, which it changes every
Yeah.
day and every hour?
I this is a fairly niche field, right? So I have worked with teams, like even external players I talk to, they don't even know what data clean room is, right? In fact, even if you search in Google, some of the results that you're going to get is actually not related to the actual data clean room that we are talking about here. It could be like if you're manufacturing like a chip or a semiconductor and you have like a
Yes,
literal clean room, you would
you're
see
right.
some of those research papers show up in Google, like, hey, implementing clean room, right? So it's a fairly niche area, and people who know it know it. People who don't know it like are surprised, right? And that's where like people who might actually have a lot of these use cases that they may be wondering how to solve, the connecting them to like, hey, there is this technology called data clean room that you can use to solve it itself will be a big innovation next, right? But I think a good source, I would say, is go after these cloud players, right? Like if you just do a search of like, hey, who are the top 5 or 10 clean room vendors that are out there in the market? you would immediately see a lot of these case studies that they put, right? Especially for clean room vendors who also have first party data, like ads data, like the walled gardens. They put out examples of how their customers have benefited. So those are like real world use cases where a real customer used a data clean room and saw like 15% increase in conversion or lift in sales or whatever, right? So you have documented case studies from these people that I would say for people who are interested can learn about this, and that can light up the bulb of where you could benefit from this technology as well. And that also an added value of using those case studies is you can go and talk to your decision makers and leaders in your organization and kind of share those. Hey, here is what company X did or company Y did, and here is the return they saw. Maybe we should implement or invest time in implementing such a solution in our organization as well, right? So I would say that's the biggest source of information, right? Go directly to the cloud vendors.
Really good. I think we will need 1,000 more podcasts from you, Annamalai, to understand each topic and every specific thing we just learned today. I'm gonna just close off and do a little bit of a recap, at least the one that I got from you. That is pretty much taking the project as a strategic, not as a workaround, because otherwise it won't work. Definitely finding the high business value use case. Otherwise, it will be quite hard. Even though what I understood is that there are quick wins, like for example, the measurement and advertising use cases to the wall guard that you just said. So perhaps some brands out there kind of start from there, but if they want to do an in-house data came from a specific use case, they need to find the business value attached to it, the big business value attached to it, and definitely engaging with legal from the beginning. That because data clean room are not the joker card to bypass any regulations. It's just tool to help us do it better, but legal needs to be there from day one. Those are the three things, and also a new concept again that is this collaboration idea that no one said to me so far. So I think that's to me the main takeaways of today's podcast, and I really want to thank you once again.
For sure, man. Great chatting with you and sharing something I know of.